Alara Voss felt the sun burning her skin through the thin fabric of her uniform, though most of her body was hidden beneath the coarse, shifting sand. She had been captured hours ago by the Vrelks, an alien species whose cruelty was whispered about across the outer rim, and now she was buried to her neck in the desert sands of Saharian. Her arms were pinned beneath her, legs immobile, and the oppressive heat made her mind swim with exhaustion. She closed her eyes, certain that this was the end. The sky above her was a harsh blue, unrelenting and endless. The sun blazed down as if it knew her despair, scorching the exposed parts of her body. She could feel the fine grains of sand pressing against her skin, rubbing it raw in some places, sticking in others, almost suffocating her. For a moment she allowed herself the surrender of despair. There was no way she could escape. The Vrelks were clever hunters, relentless and much stronger than any human. Death seemed inevitable, and the thought of it brought a strange peace. She exhaled slowly, letting her mind drift. She imagined herself lying in a quiet meadow on Earth, the grass cool under her bare feet, the sun gentle and warm rather than punishing. The memory made her heart ache. She had joined the mission to explore uncharted planets, to see what lay beyond the familiar stars. She had never imagined that it would end like this, with her trapped in the sand of a desert world so hostile it seemed alive. A strange sound broke her thoughts. At first she thought it was the wind, the dry Saharian wind whispering across the dunes. But then it came again, clearer this time and unmistakable. A voice, a human voice. Ilara. She opened her eyes cautiously, blinking against the harsh sunlight. No one was in sight. Only the endless waves of sand stretched to the horizon. The wind shifted, sending small clouds of grains into her eyes, making her blink rapidly. The voice came again, this time more confident, more distinct. Hang on, I've got you. She was alone, or so she thought. The Vrelks had made sure the desert was a death trap. Humans weren't supposed to survive here without full equipment, food, and water. And yet this voice, clear and strong, defied all logic. Ilara, listen to me. You're not alone, the voice called again. There was something calm about it, steady and determined, a contrast to the panic rising in her chest. She strained her eyes against the sand and the sun, trying to locate the source. And then she saw it, a faint shadow moving along the ridge of a dune, keeping low, careful not to be noticed by any Vrelk patrols. A man, human, somehow impossibly he was here. Who are you? She croaked, her throat dry, voice barely a whisper. I'm Marcus, the voice replied. A human like you. Keep your eyes on me and don't panic. I know a way out. He surveyed the area and started digging around her carefully, his movements precise, almost surgical. He worked quickly, but cautiously, knowing that any noise or misstep could alert the Vrelks. Within minutes, he had freed her shoulders and arms, though her legs remained buried. Ilara gasped as she finally moved her arms, flexing stiff fingers and shoulders. Relief washed over her, but fear was still close behind. How are you here? She asked, astonishment coloring her voice. Marcus's eyes, dark and sharp, met hers. Humans can survive things others think impossible. You just have to know how to use your mind and your body. I've been on this planet for months, hiding, surviving. And now I'm going to get you out of here. Every movement was deliberate, calculated to avoid attracting attention. The desert was silent except for the faint hiss of wind over the dunes, but she knew danger could be anywhere. The Vrelks were hunters, and hunters always expected prey to run, but humans had a way of doing the unexpected. Once free, Ilara rose unsteadily to her feet, shaking sand from her uniform. Her legs trembled with weakness and disbelief, but she felt alive, more alive than she had in hours. She looked at Marcus, studying the rugged features of his face, the sharpness in his eyes. He was human, yet the harsh desert had carved him into something more, something hardened yet undeniably alive. Come on, Marcus said. We have to move. They'll be back soon to check on you. Vrelks never leave things half-finished. He showed her how to find shade, conserve energy, and navigate by the sun. He pointed out the small signs of life that indicated water or edible plants, and he explained how to avoid Vrelk patrols. Humans are survivors, he said, his voice low but firm. We don't give up because things are hard, we adapt. That's what makes us dangerous to species like the Vrelks. They underestimate us. They think the desert will kill us, but it won't, not if we know what we're doing. Hours passed as they moved silently across the dunes, Marcus guiding her through hidden paths and small depressions in the sand that offered cover. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in harsh shades of orange and red. The desert, once blindingly oppressive, became a landscape of shadows and subtle movements. Rest here for a moment, Marcus said, pointing to a small rocky outcrop. "We'll make camp. You need to regain strength if you're going to survive the night." The thought made her stomach tighten with gratitude and disbelief. As she rested, Marcus prepared a small device that filtered and cooled the scant water he carried. The act was simple, almost mundane, yet it was miraculous to Alara. Water, life, survival, it all seemed impossible on this planet, yet here it was, provided by another human who had somehow mastered the harshness of Saharian. "You're going to make it," Marcus said, almost as if reading her thoughts. "Humans always do. We're stubborn, we fight, we survive." As the night fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, the desert turning from a furnace to a frozen wasteland. Alara shivered, but Marcus had prepared a small shelter using reflective material and heat-absorbing rocks. He was meticulous, careful, and efficient. Every action he took reinforced what he had said earlier. Humans could survive here, and they could thrive where others could not. Sleep came in short, broken bursts for Alara, each time haunted by visions of the Vrelks and the burning sand. Yet beneath her fear, hope remained. Hope and determination, fragile but persistent, burned within her chest. She had been rescued from death once. She could be saved again, and this time she would not be a victim. In the small hours before dawn, she heard Marcus moving silently outside the shelter. The desert was alive with whispers of wind and distant alien cries, but there was no threat near them. She listened to his calm, steady breathing, a human presence in a world that had tried to erase her. Alara realized something profound in that quiet moment. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, had not broken her. The Vrelks, terrifying and merciless, had underestimated her. And Marcus, a human who had survived months in this hellish landscape, was living proof of what she now understood. Humanity was resilient, clever, and unstoppable in ways the galaxy had yet to understand. As the first light of Saharian's sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dunes, Alara rose. Her body was tired, battered, and sand-stung, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. Today, she would survive. Tomorrow, she would fight. And she would show the galaxy why humans were a force to be reckoned with. She followed Marcus into the desert, each step a testament to human endurance. And somewhere beneath the shifting sands, the Vrelks would soon learn a lesson they had forgotten long ago: never underestimate a human. The desert stretched endlessly before Alara, a vast sea of sand and stone, shifting with the whims of the wind. She followed Marcus Kane, every step careful and deliberate. Each dune was a small hill to be climbed, each shadow a potential hiding place for the Vrelks. She felt the weight of exhaustion pressing against her limbs, but it was nothing compared to the relentless fear that had gripped her the day before. Fear now had a new companion, hope, fragile but persistent. Marcus moved with an almost supernatural ease across the dunes. He had learned to read the desert, to know when the sand beneath his feet was loose or packed, when a ridge could hide their movement from distant eyes. His every gesture spoke of months of survival, of adapting to a world designed to kill anything that wasn't native. He looked over his shoulder and caught her gaze. "Keep moving," he said, voice calm but firm. "Don't stop. They might still be watching." She felt herself learning, absorbing every movement, every technique, as if survival itself was contagious. Hours passed in a tense silence. The sun climbed high, its rays scorching her exposed skin, forcing her to keep her head low, draped beneath a scarf Marcus had given her. Each grain of sand that slipped into her uniform, each gust of wind, was a reminder of the danger that waited to crush them. And yet she moved, because stopping was death. Humans did not give up. That Marcus had shown her in his actions more than his words. As the heat reached its peak, Marcus led her to a small depression between two dunes. Here the sun's rays were blocked and the wind offered little relief. He gestured for her to sit and handed her a small canister of filtered water. "Drink slowly," he instructed. "Every drop counts." She studied Marcus as he worked, setting up a simple trap using reflective panels and sand to create a diversion should anyone approach. He spoke in short, clipped sentences, each one carrying authority and experience. "Vrelks think the desert will kill humans. That's their mistake. They underestimate us, and that's how we survive." He had been alone here for months, living without any formal support, surviving on ingenuity and knowledge alone. And yet he spoke with confidence, with an unshakable certainty that humans could endure. She realized then that hope was more than just a feeling, it was a strategy. Humans survived not just by fighting, but by believing that survival was always possible. As the day wore on, Marcus began teaching her more about the desert and its subtle signs. He showed her how to spot the faint trails left by creatures in the sand, how to use the sun's angle to navigate, and how to sense water hidden beneath the dunes. Every lesson was practical, brutal, and necessary. Humans did not thrive because they were strong. They thrived because they could think, adapt, and learn faster than any other species. "Ilara," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to a slight disturbance in the sand. "Look at this, tracks. These are smaller, could be one of us or something else." She felt the weight of isolation, yet also the strength of shared resilience. As evening fell, the desert changed. The heat faded, replaced by a cold so sharp it seemed to cut through layers of clothing. The sands, which had burned her skin in the sun, now threatened to freeze her bones. Marcus set up a small camp, using reflective panels to trap heat from the remaining sun and rocks to shield them from the wind. He produced a small ration of food, dry and tough, but enough to keep them going. "Ilara, humans endure extremes because we have to. We've adapted to planets like this before. We think, we innovate, and we fight," Marcus said, his voice low but intense. "The Vrelks don't understand us. They think size, strength, and technology win every battle. But intelligence, adaptability, and stubbornness, those are the real weapons humans carry." She felt a sense of pride, an almost electric recognition that she was part of something larger than herself. Humans did not simply exist, they overcame. Night fell completely, and the stars blinked cold and distant overhead. The desert was alive with sounds Ilara had never noticed before: the whisper of shifting sand, distant cries of unknown creatures, and the faint hum of wind through rock formations. She lay awake beside Marcus, thinking of the Vrelks and the danger still lurking beyond the dunes. And yet, fear was tempered by determination. Humans did not succumb easily. They survived because they refused to surrender. The next morning, Marcus began a new lesson: offensive survival. "You can't just run and hide forever," he explained. "Sometimes you have to fight back, and when you do, you must use what the desert gives you." He showed how the Vrelks, heavy armor and rigid bodies, could be turned against them. Ilara absorbed every detail, realizing that survival wasn't passive. It was active, calculated, and ruthless when necessary. As they moved through the dunes, Marcus spoke of the humans who had come before them, explorers and settlers who had faced impossible odds and thrived. He told her stories of ingenuity: dehydrated rations converted into water, sandstorms used as cover, traps made from nothing but rocks and metal scraps. Each tale was a lesson, a reminder that humans could always find a way. By midday, they reached a rocky ridge that offered a view across several miles of dunes. From this vantage, Marcus scanned the horizon. "Vrelks," he said quietly. "They're out there, they know we're here, but they don't know where, not yet." Humans were never truly helpless. Even in a world designed to destroy them, they could thrive. Hours later, as the sun began its descent, Marcus decided they needed to move again. The desert offered no mercy for the stagnant, and the Vrelks' curiosity, or cruelty, could strike at any moment. He led her through a narrow pass, hidden from the wider view, where the sand was cooler and the wind gentler. Each step was a lesson in precision and care. "Ilara," he said, "you're doing well. Humans are adaptable. We endure when others fail. That's what makes us dangerous." Every blister, every cut, every ache was proof of her survival, proof that humans could endure where others would perish. She felt a strange pride swell within her, a recognition that she was part of something unstoppable. As night fell once more, they set up camp in a small cave, shielded from wind and sand. Marcus pulled out a small, primitive heat source, something he had fashioned from scavenged parts. The flickering light illuminated his determined face. "Humans survive because we think, we adapt, and we fight. And sometimes," he added with a rare smile, "we find each other when the odds are against us." She had been buried to her neck in sand, certain of death, and yet here she was, alive, learning, and growing stronger. She realized that survival was more than endurance. It was intelligence, strategy, and a refusal to surrender to the impossible. Humans were not merely prey. They were predators in their own right, capable of outthinking, outmaneuvering, and outlasting almost anything. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the Vrelks were watching, waiting, assuming humans were weak. But Marcus had taught her the most important lesson: humans were never truly weak. They endured, they adapted, and they struck back in ways no one expected. Ilara lay down in the cave, exhausted but vigilant. Sleep came slowly, punctuated by dreams of sand and shadow, danger and survival. She knew the desert would not be forgiving, but she also knew that as long as humans like Marcus existed, she would have a chance. Humans survived where others failed, not because the universe favored them, but because they refused to surrender. When she awoke, the first rays of Saharian sun painted the dunes in gold and crimson. Marcus was already awake, scouting the horizon, ready for another day of survival and evasion. Alara rose beside him, stronger than before, and for the first time since she had been buried in the sand, she felt the unshakable certainty that she would live. Humans survived against impossible odds. And now she was ready to prove it. Alara had been moving with Marcus for days across the shifting dunes of Saharian. Each step tested her endurance, but more than her body, her mind was learning to adapt. She noticed the subtle signs Marcus taught her. The faint trails in the sand that indicated water beneath the surface, the direction of small desert winds that signaled hidden ridges, even the distant cries of creatures that could be predators or warnings. Every detail mattered. Every mistake could be fatal. Marcus had begun to show her something new. They were not merely surviving, they were learning to fight back. "Alara, look here," Marcus said, crouching beside a narrow sand trench. "The Vrelks expect humans to run or hide. They think our strength lies in numbers or weapons. They are wrong. Humans think differently. Humans improvise. That's our real weapon." Marcus began showing her how to set a simple trap using sand and rocks. A Vrelk, heavy and armored, would step unknowingly into a depression, triggering a small collapse that could throw them off balance or slow them down. It was simple, clever, and deadly. "Why are we doing this?" she asked. "We could just keep moving, keep hiding." "The Vrelks will adapt, learn our patterns. We need to be unpredictable. Humans survive because we adapt faster than anyone else. Now it's time to prove it." Marcus had survived here for months alone, and now he was teaching her to do the same. Together, they could become a force the Vrelks could not anticipate. The sun was high, unyielding, when they heard the first sign of pursuit. A deep rumble traveled across the dunes, a sound alien and chilling. The Vrelks were searching, using devices that could detect movement beneath the sand. Alara's heart pounded, but Marcus remained calm. "Stay low," he whispered. "Use the terrain. The Vrelks see in straight lines. They can't adapt to curves or shadows the way we can." But Marcus had prepared. "Watch," he said, adjusting a small reflective panel. The sunlight caught the metal just right, creating a blinding flash that forced the nearest Vrelk to cover its eyes. Another panel, angled differently, made it appear as if there were humans moving in multiple directions. The Vrelks, confused by these illusions, stumbled slightly. Alara felt a surge of exhilaration. Humans could fight without traditional weapons. Humans could use their environment in ways others could not even imagine. Marcus was showing her the power of human ingenuity, the ability to think, to create, and to exploit the weaknesses of any opponent. The Vrelks recovered and resumed their hunt, but it was no longer simple. Alara and Marcus moved through hidden pathways Marcus had discovered, laying traps and leaving false tracks. Every step they took was calculated to mislead, exhaust, and frustrate their pursuers. The Vrelks had assumed humans would be easy prey. They had underestimated them. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small rocky outcrop that offered a vantage point over a wide expanse of desert. Marcus paused, scanning the horizon. "They're regrouping," he said. "The Vrelks don't understand humans yet. They don't know we fight back intelligently, that we learn and adapt. Soon they will realize we are not like any prey they have faced before." Humans had been buried, hunted, underestimated, and yet here they were, alive and adapting faster than their captors. As the sun began to sink, Marcus led her into a narrow canyon, almost invisible to anyone scanning from above. He showed her how to use shadows and rocks to remain hidden, to move silently, and to prepare traps that could turn the tide of confrontation. Every lesson emphasized the HFY truth. Humans were resilient, clever, and unpredictable. "Tomorrow," Marcus said as they set up a small camp, "we do more than survive, we strike." Yet Marcus had survived against them, had studied them, and had prepared a strategy that could give humans the upper hand. It was bold, audacious, and terrifying, but it also made sense. Humans had survived impossible odds before. This was just another challenge. That night, as the desert grew cold and the wind whispered through the canyon, Marcus taught Alara about patience and observation. He pointed out the subtle changes in temperature, the faintest shifts in sand patterns, and the distant hum of alien technology. Humans, he explained, survived not because they were physically superior, but because they could see what others missed, think ahead, and act decisively. Alara lay awake, reflecting on everything Marcus had shown her. She had been buried alive, nearly abandoned to death, and yet here she was, learning to fight back against a species that had considered humans weak. She understood now the truth that Marcus had been teaching all along. Humans survived because they refused to be predictable, because they refused to surrender, because they could endure and innovate when all else failed. The next morning they set out before dawn, moving quietly across the sand. Marcus led her to a hidden pass where they could observe a small Vrelk encampment below. The aliens were arrogant and careless, confident that humans would never challenge them. "Alara, see their weakness," Marcus whispered. "They rely on their size and strength. They rely on intimidation, but they underestimate humans. We can use this." The desert that had once seemed endless and oppressive was now a battlefield, and she was learning to fight with intelligence and strategy. She understood that humans did not survive by brute force alone. They survived because they were clever, adaptive, and determined. As they descended toward the encampment, Marcus explained the plan. They would create diversions, using the sun and sand to blind and confuse the Vrelks. They would set traps to disable or slow their attackers, and they would strike with precision, taking advantage of every weakness the aliens displayed. Alara absorbed every detail, committing it to memory. She understood that this was more than survive. It was a statement. Humans were not weak. Humans were not easily controlled. Humans could endure, adapt, and fight back against even the most powerful adversaries. The Vrelks, unaware of the humans watching them, continued their routines. Their arrogance was palpable. They had assumed the desert was a weapon against lifeforms like humans. They had assumed the humans would be buried, forgotten, or crushed. They had assumed wrong. Marcus signaled, and they began setting small, precise traps, using rocks and sand to create hazards that would slow and confuse the aliens. They worked quickly, silently, every movement purposeful. Humans had the patience to endure, the intelligence to plan, and the ingenuity to use the environment as a weapon. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, then began its slow descent. The traps were set, and Marcus led Alara to a hidden vantage point to observe the results. Soon, the Vrelks would encounter the obstacles, and humans would demonstrate that survival was not merely endurance. It was adaptation, strategy, and resilience. As the first Vrelk stumbled into a trap, Alara felt a surge of triumph. She realized that this was only the beginning. Humans had been underestimated for too long, and now they were proving their true strength. The ability to endure, adapt, and overcome when all seemed lost. Marcus turned to her, eyes shining with a rare intensity. "This is what humans do," he said. "We survive, we fight. And when others think we're weak, we show them exactly how wrong they are." As the sun sank below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Alara felt the unmistakable surge of human pride. They were not merely prey. They were survivors. They were strategists. They were unstoppable. And soon the Vrelks would learn the truth of what it meant to underestimate a human. The desert was no longer a trap. It was a proving ground. And humans, buried no longer, would rise. The first light of Saharian sun spilled across the desert, turning the dunes into a sea of gold and crimson. Alara and Marcus crouched behind a rocky outcrop, surveying the Vrelk encampment below. It was larger than they had anticipated, with armored aliens moving in precise patterns, confident in their superiority. But Marcus's eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. He had spent months studying the terrain, the creatures, and the enemy. Today, he was ready to show the Vrelks exactly what humans were capable of. Alara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from anticipation. She had been buried in sand, abandoned to death, and yet here she was, standing on the edge of a human-led operation against one of the galaxy's deadliest species. Marcus turned to her. "Remember everything I taught you," he said. "Humans survive because we think ahead, we adapt, and we strike when they least expect it." These were simple, crude by alien standards, but effective when used with intelligence and precision. Humans had learned to use the desert as a weapon, and now it would serve them in the coming battle. They moved silently, slipping through hidden passes and shaded gullies. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. The Vrelks had assumed humans were weak, predictable, and slow. They would soon learn how wrong they were. Marcus led her to a narrow canyon where the walls rose high above, casting deep shadows. "Here," he whispered, "we set the main trap. The Vrelks will be forced into this corridor. They'll think they have the advantage, but we've turned the desert against them." The sunlight glinted off the metal, creating illusions of movement across the canyon walls. Loose sand would collapse beneath heavy Vrelk armor, throwing them off balance. Every detail mattered. Every action was a testament to human ingenuity. As the traps were set, Marcus gave her a nod. Now we wait. The Vrelks began to move, patrolling the desert as they had for months. Their arrogance was palpable. They had no reason to suspect humans could plan, let alone set traps so cleverly. The first Vrelk entered the canyon. It moved confidently, armor clanking, sensing nothing amiss. Then the ground shifted beneath its feet. Loose sand gave way, and the creature stumbled, arms flailing. Ilara watched, heart racing, as the trap worked perfectly. The Vrelk tried to recover, but another panel reflected the sunlight into its sensors, blinding it temporarily. "Good," Marcus whispered, eyes gleaming. "Keep your focus. There's more to come." Rocks fell, sand shifted, and blinding flashes of light caused confusion and panic. The aliens were strong, but their size and armor made them slow and predictable. Humans, small and clever, had turned these advantages against them. Ilara felt a surge of pride. She was part of this. She had learned, adapted, and now she was proving that humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast even the most dangerous species. She moved through the canyon, adjusting traps, signaling Marcus, and ensuring every detail worked as planned. Humans survived not because they were stronger, they survived because they could think. The Vrelks began to realize the situation was no longer simple. Panic rippled through their ranks as their numbers were reduced by the carefully placed hazards. They tried to regroup, but the canyon offered no easy escape. Humans had controlled the terrain completely, forcing the Vrelks into predictable patterns while exploiting every weakness. Marcus led a small strike team, humans who had survived in the desert, each skilled in evasion, improvisation, and strategy. They moved silently, using the shadows and terrain to their advantage. Small, precise strikes disabled key Vrelk units, while the main traps continued to wreak havoc. Ilara struck quickly, using a sharpened metal rod to trip a Vrelk as it staggered from one of the collapsing sand pits. The creature fell with a heavy crash, momentarily stunned. Her heart pounded, adrenaline surging through her veins. Humans were proving what they had always known, that courage, intelligence, and adaptability were far more powerful than sheer strength. The battle escalated. The Vrelks, frustrated and enraged, began to fight back with more coordination. They adjusted their patterns, attempting to predict human movements, but Marcus and Ilara were always a step ahead, anticipating changes, adapting strategies, and exploiting the environment. The canyon became a chessboard, with humans moving pieces with unmatched precision. "Ilara!" Marcus shouted. "The ridge above. Use the rocks." The fight continued into the afternoon, the sun burning overhead, the desert becoming a theater of ingenuity and survival. Every move the Vrelks made was met with human adaptability, and each victory, small or large, reinforced the truth Marcus had taught her. Humans never gave up, humans never stayed buried, and humans always found a way. As the day wore on, the tide of the battle began to shift definitively. The Vrelks were exhausted, slowed by the traps, confused by the tactics, and forced into positions that made them vulnerable. The humans, though fewer in number, were strategic, relentless, and intelligent. Their survival instincts were sharper than any alien technology. Ilara noticed a group of Vrelks attempting to flank their position. She signaled Marcus, and together they used a combination of mirrors and sand traps to channel the flanking force into a narrow passage. The Vrelks stumbled, struggling to maneuver in the tight corridor, their size and armor now a disadvantage. Marcus moved beside her, both of them striking quickly, silently, and efficiently. Humans had learned to fight not with brute force, but with precision, timing, and the environment itself. Each Vrelk that fell, each trap that succeeded, reinforced the unshakable human will to survive. By evening, the Vrelk's organized assault had broken. Small groups fled into the desert, disoriented, injured, and humiliated. Humans had turned the desert into a weapon, proving once again that intelligence, adaptability, and courage were their greatest strengths. Ilara sank to the sand, exhausted but exhilarated. She had been buried in sand, left to die, and now she had fought alongside Marcus to outwit one of the galaxy's most feared species. Her body ached, her skin was burned and scraped, but her spirit soared. Humans survived not just because they endured, they thrived because they refused to be underestimated. Marcus joined her, offering a small smile. They thought they could bury us, crush us, and erase us, but they were wrong. Humans never stay buried. She had witnessed firsthand what humans were capable of: ingenuity, adaptability, and an unyielding spirit that no alien, no matter how strong or clever, could defeat. Night fell and the desert cooled rapidly. The bodies of defeated Vrelks lay scattered, a testament to human skill and strategy. Alara and Marcus surveyed the battlefield, their eyes sharp and alert. Victory was theirs, but they knew the fight was far from over. Other Vrelk forces would eventually arrive, and the humans would need to continue using every ounce of their cunning and strength to survive. As they moved to a small, hidden cave to rest, Alara reflected on the events of the day. The desert that had once been a prison had become a proving ground. The Vrelks who had underestimated her species had been outwitted, outmaneuvered, and defeated. She realized that humans were not simply survivors, they were innovators, warriors, and strategists capable of triumph against impossible odds. Marcus settled beside her, maintaining a watchful eye on the horizon. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow we reinforce, we prepare." The Vrelks will not give up easily, and neither will we. Humans survive, humans fight, and humans win. But she had survived, adapted, and now she was part of a force that could challenge even the most formidable enemies. Humans had taken the desert and made it theirs. They had turned fear into strength, danger into opportunity, and despair into triumph. As she drifted into a restless sleep, the desert wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the faint echoes of a battle that humans had won, not through sheer strength, but through intelligence, courage, and the indomitable will to survive. Alara dreamed of sand, sunlight, and strategy. She dreamed of humans rising, overcoming, and proving once again that no matter how harsh the world, no matter how relentless the enemy, humans would endure, adapt, and emerge victorious. And when she awoke, the first rays of the sun illuminated the desert in gold. The victory of the day was hers to remember, but the battle for Saharian was only beginning. The Vrelks would return, but now, humans had learned their strengths and weaknesses. They had proven that survival was not enough. They could dominate, adapt, and conquer the odds. Alara rose beside Marcus, ready for what the desert and the Vrelks would throw at them next. The canyon that had been a battlefield would become a stronghold. The traps and strategies they had used today would be refined, improved, and expanded. Humanity's ingenuity was limitless, and every challenge would only make them stronger. Humans were no longer buried. Humans were standing, fighting, and thriving. And the galaxy would learn, as Saharian did today, never to underestimate the human spirit. The desert of Saharian was quiet in the early hours, but silence did not mean safety. Alara and Marcus stood on the ridge overlooking the dunes, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the returning Vrelks. The previous day had been a victory, but the humans knew better than to assume the enemy would give up. The Vrelks were cunning, relentless, and they hated being outsmarted. Yet humans had something no alien could replicate: adaptability, intelligence, and an unbreakable will to survive. Alara adjusted the scarf over her face, shielding her skin from the rising sun. Every movement was calculated, each step measured. Marcus had taught her well, showing her how to read the desert, how to anticipate danger, and how to use the terrain to their advantage. She felt stronger, faster, and more alert than ever before. The woman who had once been buried alive in the sand was now a strategist, a fighter, and a survivor. "We have to reinforce our positions," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "The Vrelks will return in greater numbers. They'll be looking to reclaim what they lost yesterday. We can't let them catch us off guard." They moved quickly across the dunes, selecting key points to create barriers, false trails, and new ambush sites. The desert was no longer just a battleground. It was a weapon in human hands. As the sun climbed higher, faint movements appeared on the horizon. The Vrelks had returned, larger in number and more cautious. They advanced slowly, wary of the traps and illusions that Marcus and Alara had crafted. But the humans had planned for this. They had learned the patterns, predicted their approach, and set the desert to channel the aliens into narrow corridors where size and strength became disadvantages. "Alara, stay close," Marcus instructed. "Timing is everything." Each trap was triggered at the right moment, each rock displaced perfectly to create obstacles. Sand collapsed under the Vrelks' weight, blinding flashes of sunlight forced them to shield their eyes, and sudden movements from hidden humans caused confusion and hesitation. The Vrelks' confidence began to waver. They had expected easy prey, but humans had turned the desert itself into an enemy. Alara felt exhilaration mixed with determination. Humans survived by thinking, adapting, and refusing to be predictable. Every step she took, every action she executed, reinforced that truth. She used the canyon walls to her advantage, pushing a boulder to block a path while signaling to Marcus to trigger a reflective panel trap. One by one, the Vrelks fell into the humans' carefully designed snares. But victory did not come without cost. One of the Vrelks, larger than the others, managed to bypass the initial traps and charged toward Alara. She dodged, heart pounding, realizing how close she had come to death once again. Marcus reacted instantly, throwing a weighted rope to trip the creature. It fell hard, but its roar echoed across the desert, alerting the others to the humans' positions. "Keep moving," Marcus shouted. "Use the terrain, don't let them corner you." She could see Marcus coordinating the remaining humans, signaling movements, setting up diversions, and striking with deadly precision. Hours passed in a relentless dance of strategy and survival. The Vrelks adapted, but the humans were always one step ahead. Every trap, every maneuver, every feint was calculated. Humans were not merely reacting, they were controlling the battle. The desert had become a canvas for their ingenuity, a place where intelligence triumphed over brute force. Alara moved toward a narrow canyon where a group of Vrelks had tried to regroup. She signaled to Marcus, and together they triggered a combination of traps they had set in advance. Rocks fell from above, sand shifted under their feet, and blinding reflections forced them into confusion. The humans struck with precision, using their smaller size and speed to their advantage. The Vrelks were formidable, but humans were clever, adaptable, and relentless. By mid-afternoon, the tide of battle had clearly turned. The Vrelks were disoriented, exhausted, and their confidence shattered. The humans, though fewer in number, controlled the terrain, dictated the pace, and exploited every weakness. Alara felt a surge of pride and exhilaration. She had survived the desert, adapted to its harshness, and now she was part of a human force proving that survival was only the beginning. Marcus joined her on the ridge, his face smeared with dust and sweat, but his eyes bright with determination. "Look at them," he said. "They thought they could bury us, crush us, erase us, but humans survive, adapt, and rise always." They had been underestimated, nearly killed, and left for dead, but the humans had turned the tables. Every trap, every strategy, every careful movement reinforced the HFY truth. Humanity was resilient, clever, and unstoppable when it refused to surrender. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dunes, Marcus signaled to the remaining humans. It was time for the final phase. They moved quickly, decisively, and silently, taking positions to cut off the Vrelks' retreat. The aliens, exhausted and disoriented, had no choice but to engage with the humans on their terms. The final confrontation was swift and precise. Humans struck with tools, traps, and ingenuity. One by one, the Vrelks fell, their armor useless against human strategy and adaptability. Alara moved like a force of nature, every action deliberate, every strike purposeful. The desert had become her ally, the environment a weapon, and humans had become predators in a world designed to crush them. By nightfall, the remaining Vrelks fled into the desert, their morale shattered and their numbers greatly reduced. Humans had survived, adapted, and emerged victorious. The battle had been brutal, exhausting, and dangerous, but the result was undeniable. Humans were a force that could not be underestimated. Alara sank to the sand, exhaustion and exhilaration mixing into a profound sense of achievement. She had been buried to her neck in sand, left to die, and now she had fought in one of the greatest displays of human ingenuity and resilience she had ever witnessed. Every hardship, every challenge had been overcome. Humans had survived, and in doing so they had proven their strength, intelligence, and indomitable spirit. Marcus sat beside her, watching the horizon for any sign of further threats. "Today, humans have shown what we are capable of," he said. "We survived the desert, we adapted, and we fought back against impossible odds, and we won. That's what makes humans extraordinary." She had learned the truth that Marcus had taught her from the beginning. Humans were never truly weak, never truly helpless, and never truly buried. Every challenge, every threat, only made them stronger, smarter, and more determined. The night air cooled around them, the desert wind whispering through the dunes. Alara and Marcus watched the stars emerge, distant and cold, yet somehow full of promise. The desert, once a symbol of death, was now a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. They had survived the impossible, turned the odds in their favor, and claimed victory where none had expected it. Alara thought of the humans who had come before, those explorers and survivors who had faced impossible odds on countless worlds. She realized that she was part of a legacy, a species that refused to be buried, a species that survived, adapted, and triumphed against any challenge. The Vrelks had assumed humans were weak. But humans had shown that intelligence, determination, and adaptability were far more powerful than strength or size. As dawn approached, Alara and Marcus began planning for the future. They would reinforce their positions, establish a base, and ensure that humans could continue to survive and thrive on Saharian. The Vrelks might return, but humans had learned, adapted, and proven their strength. They were ready for anything. Alara stood on the ridge once more, looking out over the desert. The sands stretched endlessly, but she no longer saw them as a trap. She saw them as a proving ground, a place where humans could demonstrate their ingenuity, courage, and resilience. She felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that she and her companions had turned despair into triumph, danger into opportunity, and death into survival. Marcus joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The galaxy will learn what we already know," he said quietly. "Humans survive, humans fight, and humans always rise no matter the odds." She had been buried to her neck in sand, faced near certain death, and yet she had survived. She had learned, adapted, and fought alongside other humans to achieve victory against an enemy that had assumed their superiority. The desert of Saharian was vast and dangerous, but humans had proven that they could endure, adapt, and conquer. No matter how harsh the environment, no matter how relentless the enemy, humans were never truly buried. They would rise, fight, and survive. As the first light of dawn illuminated the dunes, Alara felt a surge of determination. Humans had survived Saharian, and they would continue to survive wherever the galaxy challenged them. The Vrelks had learned a hard lesson: never underestimate a human. Alara turned to Marcus, eyes bright with resolve. "We've done it," she said. "But this is only the beginning. Humans will survive, adapt, and thrive everywhere they go. Humans never stay buried." Humanity had proven once and for all that it could endure, innovate, and overcome. The galaxy would never forget the human spirit, relentless, unstoppable, and extraordinary. Buried to her neck in the sand, she closed her eyes to die, until she heard a human voice, Sci-Fi.